So at camp, we like to greet everybody, all campers in the morning, a little something like this. Good morning, St. Stephen's.
Good morning.
It is an honor to be with you all this morning, and I'm very happy and excited to be here. I'm very thankful that I was invited to join you all today. For those who have not had the privilege of meeting quite yet, my name is Kallie Handlong, and I am the Programs Director for Camp Washington. Unlike many, Camp Washington is not the start of my journey, but camp has a special place in my heart, and it is a true piece of my being and my identity. I am a pastor's kid, or a preacher's kid, a priest's kid, whatever you'd like to call it, clergy kid, and growing up, I moved around quite a bit. I grew up in the United Methodist Church, and it was a little bit different, and so up until the second grade, I moved every single year, or almost every year. By the time I was in the ninth grade, I had been to 8 different schools and lived in 3 different states. But the one thing that stayed constant, or one of the few things that stayed constant, year after year, move after move, church after church, was camp. I've been to Girl Scout camps, I've been to church camps, I've been to weekend camps, I've been to sports camps, you name it. I've been to a bunch of different camps. And I've been a camper at camps in Arizona, Nevada, California, and Alaska. I'm from the West Coast, so I'm from over there. And when I got old enough, I eventually took on other roles. You can't always be a camper forever. Camp continued to play a role in my life as I went from being a camper to a counselor in training, to a counselor, a volunteer, an intern, program person, and now as a full-time professional at Camp Washington. Camp has become many things to me. Camp is my home. Camp is my family. Camp is stability. Camp is love. And camp is where I see God at work the most. If you were to ask me a few years ago where I would be today, I would laugh if you told me if I would be at a camp in Connecticut, because I hadn't even been to the East Coast since last year. It was like only in the movies and kind of like what you hear about. A few years ago, when I was still an undergrad, I was on my way to be a pediatrician, and then a lawyer, and then a forensic psychologist. I hadn't quite made up my mind quite yet. But from a very young age, it was instilled in me that one day I had to provide. I had to provide for my family. I had to provide for those I loved and cared for. So I needed to get a job that had and provided money. And that was my plan. I was like, okay, that's what I got to do. That's what I'm going to do. But every time I went through the path to a job that had money, like doctor or lawyer, it just didn't feel quite right to me. I always felt a pull to serve others in a more relational way, people to people. When I looked into and asked around about going into camping, every single person told me to run the other way. Whether they were on the board, whether they were a director, whether they had been camping for 20 years, everyone said to go the other way because the pay was not worth the heartache. It was all about the money. But no matter what, there were a few camp memories that kept pulling me back to camp. Like, why did I keep having this pull, this draw to camp? Why did camp have me hooked? One of those memories, when I was 16 years old, I volunteered at a camp called Royal Families Kids Camp. This is a week-long camp, so it's not the whole summer, just a week, and it's for kids who have been abused, abandoned, and neglected in the foster care system. And during this week, those kids just got to be kids. They weren't caretakers, they weren't afraid, they didn't go hungry, they were just kids. Now, you can imagine what some of these kids may have seen, what they have witnessed, what they have been through. But despite all that pain and the hurt that these kids had seen and felt, it was one of the most joy-filled weeks I have ever had the privilege of being a part of. This experience and this camp is what instilled in me that camp is for everyone. Doesn't matter what age we are, what our experiences are, what we've witnessed, what we've seen, what we've been through. Camp is a place for people to get away, to disconnect, to reconnect with themselves. My passion for camp, for being for all people, was planted and instilled in this moment. Another moment at camp was when I was a college student working at summer staff. I worked quite a few years and I loved it quite a bit. One night we were getting ready for bed. It was a children's camp. They were younger. And one of the campers in the back corner was screaming because there was a spider in their bunk. I mean, it's camp. There's going to be some insects. Being the counselor I was, I went on over to investigate. But to be honest, and what I'll tell y'all is there was no spider. I didn't see a spider. I didn't see proof of spider life. I didn't see a spider web, nothing. I was like, okay, whatever. But we do what we're trained to do. As a counselor, I was trained to, okay, how can I handle the situation? So I pretended to capture the spider, and I said their bunk was spider-free. That was my mistake. Not even 5 minutes later, the camper was now crying and saying that I didn't get all the spiders when I got the one, and they refused to get in their bunk. They wanted to move bunks, but we didn't have other bunks, and I wasn't quite sure what to do, so I improvised. This camp specifically was a camp that was 4,000 miles away from my home. So when I came to camp in the beginning of the summer, I brought a few things that would remind me that I was loved and cared for and I could lean on when I was homesick. And one of those things was a blanket my mom made me, the first blanket she's ever made. So I took my blanket and I went over to the camper and I told them exactly what my mom told me when she gave me the blanket. I said to the camper, "Would you like to sleep with my blanket tonight?" My mom made it for me. And she said that whenever it is wrapped around me, I will be safe, I will be loved, and I will be wrapped in prayer. When it is wrapped around you, I bet you'll feel these things too. The camper ended up sleeping with the blanket for the rest of the week. That blanket was by no means perfect, but it was what that camper needed. And I doubt when my mom made the blanket, she would realize how special it would become. This is one of the moments that I not only felt, but I saw God at work. The final moment I want to share with you is the one where I started to say yes to God. Every camp I go to, I like to find a spot where I'm like, okay, this is my God spot. And at one spot at a camp was on a lake. And what I like to do is I'd like to sit and I like to look at the mountains and I see the lake and I just talk to the mountains and the lake as if they were God. I just talk to God. And if you couldn't find me, if I was off on my hour off, or it was like, where's Kallie at? That's where I probably was. It was my favorite spot. I was about to be a junior in college, so I had finished 2 years. I was about to finish strong, and I was struggling. I hated what I was studying. My mental health was not doing well, and I needed to make a change. During one of my many times being at that lake, I remember being like, okay, God, if this is what I'm supposed to do, then make it happen because I just can't do it anymore. Then I changed my major and started to grind. Since I avoided so long this pull for camping, I had some catching up to do. At the end of the day, I changed my major 6 times, and I don't regret it. Just when I thought, okay, Kallie, we're getting somewhere, the pandemic hit. And let me tell you, camp jobs did not exist. They were not available. But I had to do something. I took it as a sign that camping wasn't for me. I was like, okay, that's it. That door is closed. So I switched gears and went to grad school for my Master's of Education in Higher Education. Fancier than it really is. But it was time to graduate again. Camp still had that pull. I was still feeling that whisper, that call to come to be a part of camping ministry. I applied to camp jobs, and ultimately, I ended up here at Camp Washington. For those who may be wondering, well, first, Has anybody heard of Camp Washington? Been to Camp Washington? Woo, woo, we got some Camp Washington fans in the house. For those who may be wondering, like, Callie, what are you talking about? What's Camp Washington? It's 300 acres, and it's pretty big. I still haven't seen all of it, no matter how much I try to explore and adventure, of God's beautiful land nestled in the Litchfield Hills. It's just close enough to, like, get away, but, like, far enough to, like, feel like you're able to get away. It's a place to be present, a place to know and feel God's grace and peace and love, and what I'd like to feel God's magic. A place to meet people where they are in their journey. Whether it's at summer camp, making friendship bracelets and doing tie-dye, whether it's as a vestry on the weekends, whether it's over food that Ben makes that's chef's kiss delicious, whether it's in programs, whether it's inside. It's a place to just gather, to be ourselves, to be together, and to share. Camp Washington is a lot of things. It's community dinners, it's weekend retreats, the Youth Advisory Council, it's alumni, it's partnerships, supporting local, it's God's creation, it's time alone with God, it's giving back, it's music, it's nature. I have seen God's work, and I have felt God's work at Camp Washington. At Camp Washington, I've seen fears conquered, like heights on the zip line that goes over the lake. Or maybe people who've learned skills, like I've only been here 1 year and I've seen people learn to swim and to do archery and to make lanyards and to do friendship bracelets, all ages. I've seen people connect over differences. Not that it's been easy, but when there's language barriers, it doesn't matter. There's connection. Whether there's people from different home countries, there's still connection. There's different religions that show up at camp, and there's still connection. I've seen our youth step into leadership and grow as human beings. I've watched them make decisions and go at it, and they're like, and I let us sit and I watch it, I'm like, but we get somewhere, and they make a decision about, okay, what is camp to them and what do we want to do? I've seen meals shared across 3 generations. Now, at the end of every summer, we ask the campers, we do little surveys, and for those who wonder, yes, I do read them all. And when a camper was asked, did you discover something new about yourself this summer? They said, I'm wanted and loved. When a camper was asked, did you have any God sightings or moments you would like to share with us? They said, when we did the labyrinth, I was washed with a sense of calm. I think we need one at camp. When a camper was asked, what is your favorite part of Camp Washington and why? They responded, the people, because I can always be myself. When asked, was this your first year at Camp Washington? And they said, I saw that it was a great place for me to be silly and funny and me. When asked, what is your favorite part of Camp Washington and why? They said, that I get to make new friends without my parents, because sometimes I want to make them all by myself. When asked, did you have any God sightings or moments you would like to share with us? They said, in every Woosaru, which is our morning worship, I feel free. When asked, did you discover something new about yourself this summer? If so, what? They said, yes, even though something is hard, still do it. Answers like these are why I do what I do. Answers like these are how I see and feel God's presence in my life. And how I got here, how I am able to see God at work at Camp Washington. Some refer to it as a call. Others say it is what we are meant to do. I could go on. I have lots of camp memories that I could share, more stories on how and where I see and have seen God in my life. But ultimately, at the end of the day, camp is my God place. Camp is where I see God the most, and camp is why I believe in and have a relationship with God. Through this journey we call life, I believe we are all called to do something, and maybe that call will change. Maybe we'll have many calls. But what I do believe is that when we lean into and we say yes to the call, doors open and it becomes easier to breathe. I leave you with this. Are you willing to listen for God's call? Are you leaning in to God's call? What is holding you back from living the life God calls you to live? Amen.